Awesome. So does this, out of curiosity, does this kind of put us in a completely different state than most other blockchains that have seem more and more seem to have this centralized crew that is the only one that works on it? Is this kind of like an attempt to move away from that?
Yeah, we like having decentralized development. It protects everyone involved. The regulatory environment is constantly shifting. And as companies like Cryptonomex seek investment and growth, uh, my open transparency here, without the disclaimer that's my personal opinion, can create liabilities for the company. So I'm just trying to minimize the liabilities that I could place on Cryptonomex by speaking openly with everyone about what I'm thinking and what we're doing. It's purely a CYA move. So fundamentally, I'm still here to offer my feedback on what I know is going on behind the scenes, and we'll go from there.
Seems like it might be a good idea, Bytemaster, if there was something to the effect of what you just said posted in Mumble, so when people come to Mumble, they get that disclaimer, so that you don't have to state it every time.
Correct. I'm stating it this time so that when Fezzi introduced me in the future, he can state it or he can post it in the text log. Either way, this is it's just here to protect everyone involved. It'd be a shame if something happened to me.
Yeah. Well, it would be a shame regardless. But yeah,
So,
I understand, and we'll definitely in the future provide that kind of introduction.
all right. That said, we have been very busy behind the scenes addressing a multitude of bugs that and enhancements for BitShares. There will be a new hard fork. It's got several things that are going to be addressed. One, fix a serialization bug that prevented us from actually issuing the stealth asset like we wanted to. That's done and complete, and will be included in the next hard fork. We've disabled negative worker votes. That patches security holes. Fundamentally, everyone's got the same amount of influence. You just have to be less active in your voting. We've added an option to disable compression on the WebSocket API. Apparently, some browsers are having issues with the compressed stream. But the good news is we've identified the bug that was causing the vast majority of the bandwidth hog for the updates between the server and the wallet. That fix is in there. And it has to do with updating the median feed more often than necessary. And we're deprecating annual membership. That last one is in progress. ABIT has 2 patches, rate limited based transactions. That's in progress, and the percentage based transfer fee is in progress. Both of those, all those changes are going to be rolled out as a single hard fork to minimize the impact to exchanges and other parties. So, so some of ABIT's patches are going against the grain of overall graphene design, so they're being reworked and refactored. I'm sorry, I'm just reading through a list of status reports from Theoretical here. This is Ben. Anyway, those are the list of things that we're doing on the back end. On the front end, I've identified a handful of issues that have been increasingly annoying to me, and I'm sure if they're annoying me, they're annoying others. So As part of eating my own dog food, I'm putting pressure on the team to fix the following. We've increased the timeout on getting the API connection. I don't know how many of you have experienced if your internet connection is slow or the server is slow, you can end up in this infinite loop of hitting retry, getting the connection shortly after, and then having to reload and start all over until you can actually do it fast enough. So we increased the timeout from 2 seconds to 5 seconds, and that should make the wallet load correctly more often, even if it is still slow. We've identified that round trip times to the server between when you click to create a transaction, whether it's place an order or do a transfer, there's 2 API calls that go round trip to the server. One to get the updated fees and the other to get the required authorities, which means that it can take several seconds, and that makes the user interface feel sluggish if you're using a slow internet connection, a high latency connection, or the server is overloaded. So we're going to prefetch and cache those so that when you click transfer, dialog pops up quickly. The other thing we're going to be doing is increasing the lifetime of a transaction, so it's less likely to expire before getting included in a block. That gives it more time to propagate. It gives the user more time to sign if a lot of signatures are required, so on and so forth. The end result of all these changes should be a dramatic reduction in bandwidth and CPU time, lower latency, more responsive user interface. So those are all the updates that are going on as far as just general enhancements. Today, we're going to be doing another rollout of the stealth. That seems to be working better and better. What's new with this rollout is we got server-side backups enabled. So you can actually save your wallet encrypted on the server and recover it. The server will not have the ability to access your private keys. So it'll also automatically back up your wallet when things change. So this is something that we've been working on for a while and should be coming out. We're testing it in the current release of the testnet UI for stealth.
Bytemaster, with regard to that last change with of saving the wallet on the server, if you mentioned that if it will do that if things change, can that be the only time that you have a backup? I mean, can you select an option to where the only time that the server will back up your wallet is if something changes in the code? I suspect is the reason that that's done.
It backs up the wallet to the server anytime there is new private keys added to your wallet, or you ask it to back it up. You can also request that your wallet be removed from the server at any time. James Calfee has put together a video going through the process. One thing that's clear to me is that our user interface right now is not refined from a intuitively flowing through it all, but at least it gets to the point that someone can actually accomplish stuff without having to go to command line tools. We would still like to work on enhancing the wallet. I know third parties have been creating wallets that have been a more restricted feature set. But we're marching on as fast as the developers and budget allows. So that's all the stuff we've been doing. It's a pretty exciting update. I've been really happy with all the little fixes that will hopefully make a big difference in the weeks ahead.
Now, out of curiosity, and this might be a silly question, but the stealth UI, is that going to be the only one that's going to have that functionality to save your keys on the server
Yeah, that's going to be
itself?
I believe that will be a global for your whole wallet. It'll save everything. I will need to check.
Awesome.
Right now, there's this transition phase. It's always harder to write the code that migrates from an old wallet format to a new wallet format, because we don't want to break anything in the meantime or cause anyone to lose anything. So that's the main holdup right now, is testing things to make sure we can convert people's wallet without losing anything. So we will see how it goes.
Well, the wallet itself right now seems like it's improving by leaps and bounds, so I'm interested in watching the progress.
Thanks for all the feedback on the GUI. I really have to commend SVK and the others for their efforts. I will say that most of what's going on in the wallet is not being directed by me. It is community driven, other than a couple things that I've requested today because of my own frustrations. The team as a whole is organically putting that stuff together. I have been considering more advanced liquidity reward stuff. So we can talk about some of those things now, because we've recognized that liquidity rewards are something that would really help bootstrap trading on the DEX. So
Definitely.
yeah.
There seems to be a lot of interest with the liquidity and side chains as a mechanism for getting more adoption and more network activity going on with us.
Correct. So two things there. Let's talk about liquidity, and then we'll talk about side chains. When it comes to liquidity, the standing proposal is to pay people who have their orders on the book for at least a minimum amount of time a percentage of the liquidity reward proportional to their volume. There's been some discussions on the forum about how to enhance that, and I'd like to add my own take on it. One of the things people suggested was that we want to reward people who trade back and forth. If you only provide liquidity on one side of the book, you shouldn't be rewarded. And so my overall philosophy here is one of if you pay 100 people, or say 100,000 people $1, or one person $100,000, you're going to get a lot more actual work done from the one person being paid 100,000 than 100 people being paid $1. It's just efficiency, it's incentive, it's motivation. $1 is not enough to motivate anyone to really do anything, but $100,000 is enough to motivate someone to actually go and try to earn it. So when it comes to liquidity rewards, we want to concentrate most of the reward into the largest providers of people who provide actual market making back and forth on both sides of the books, rather than taking the same amount of money and distributing it amongst more people. Because the people that make a penny here or a dollar there, it's not going to affect their decision. They're not going to change what they were going to do anyway because of that fraction of a cent. But if you collect that long tail of funds and concentrate it into the the top couple percent of liquidity providers, the rate of return for being, in the top 10 will be much, much higher, and therefore a lot of incentive to compete to be the best liquidity providers. So
this would basically be something like let's say I have the bot that is the most active trader on the network. Because of the volume of trading that I've actually facilitated via that bot, that account that's running the bot will get essentially a bonus for doing all that market making.
correct, assuming your bot is equally active on both sides of the book.
Oh, interesting.
If all your bot ever does is buy or have an order that sits there to buy, and it never turns around and sells, then you shouldn't be rewarded. So what we do is we take the ask side of the book volume and multiply it by the bid volume. And that combined is how we will sort it. So it's taking the area instead of the perimeter. If you want to see how it scales, which tends to, you maximize your payout by being equal magnitude in both, being a square versus a rectangle.
So it would be essentially a subsidy that that rewards the liquidity providers. Now, the question I would have is, would this be in your mind at present projected for like a long-term thing, or is this something that would be, taken away at some point in time later on, or how do you see the decisions on that being made?
I see it being made by the stakeholders voting for workers.
For workers to take it out, you mean?
Workers fund the rewards that go to the liquidity providers. I'm talking about how we divide up the pie. The stakeholders determine how much money to put into the pie.
So at a point in time when liquidity might no longer be an issue, that might scale back naturally based off of the workers being voted out.
Correct. These rewards only go to people who leave an order on the book for at least a minimum amount of time. If you consume an order on the book, you're a taker, that has the result of being negative volume. It counts against you in the reward. And if you have negative volume in either side, your total result's going to be negative, which means you don't qualify for any liquidity rewards if you are a taker. If you take more than you make. So it's your net maker-taker ratio that matters.
Now, would this be using... Well, I'm assuming this is using the bots that are currently available, which are what, like 2 or 3 of them that are in existence right now?
I'm actually not familiar with the bots that exist right now.
Does anybody know if any of the bots that currently exist would work very well with this, or if they would need to be fixed, like to offer both sides of the equation? I haven't tried the trading bots.
Existing bots would have to be tweaked to avoid updating their orders more frequently than them in period. Otherwise, they won't qualify for the liquidity reward.
Data security node is saying ClayOps might work with this, I think. Well, that's good to know. So anybody who's listening to that, maybe seek out ClayOp and talk to him about his bot. Is that going to be open source data, or is it already? Oh, he's providing a service. Gotcha. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions or comments regarding this? There has been a lot of talking about liquidity and all that stuff on the forums. Another thing that I talked to somebody behind the scenes about is the bond market being one of the things that they think is going to bring a lot of they think it's a low-hanging fruit essentially that we can capitalize on now. So where does that stand? Do you know where we sit on that?
I still owe a report on the bond market details, a little bit more detailed than the post I made a week ago. But I have been thinking about it, and I think we can produce something like that. Bond markets do increase liquidity. They give people an extra way to make money. They stabilize prices. So I think it's a good feature to have. The main thing I want to see before we get there is to make sure that the user interface is responsive. But of the two, incentivizing market makers and the bond market, I think it's be easier to incentivize market makers, by order of magnitude, less likely to cause catastrophic failures. But I wouldn't say it's a low-hanging fruit. It's one of the bigger changes that we'd have to make.
Yeah, but this is now out of curiosity. This will be paid for by a worker proposal, or how would that be? How are you guys thinking that could be done?
I prefer to pay for most of this stuff with worker proposals because everyone benefits, and it's just easier from a network's perspective, particularly because we want to try to minimize fees. But if we cannot get opinion to change in favor of workers, although looking at the voting right now, it definitely seems like paying workers is winning over not paying them, so that's a good sign. We should try to pay for things that are agreed upon, like the bond market, that way. But if it can't be done that way, then we can have fee-backed assets or something like that, where a percentage of the interest on the bond market gets paid to the people who funded it.
These fee-backed assets seem like they're a heck of a backup in terms of another option that is given when a worker might not be politically salvageable. It's very interesting. Okay, real quick, G Chicken's asking a question here. He said, and this is regarding the market making proposal that you were bringing up. He says here, question, if I wanted to provide liquidity to BTS and BTC pairing, and someone bought all of my BTC, how would I go about getting more BTC into the DEX? If I sent BTC to a gateway and ended up with trade.btc and then traded it for BTC, would that count against liquidity ratio?
Every market pair would have its own liquidity reward, because it has to be a pair. So I think this is a good opportunity to transition into the sidechain discussion, because I think it's going to solve a lot of issues.
Please.
So how many of you have taken a chance to look at the regulations around being a gateway? I've been reading through the FinCEN rulings, the IRS rulings, and trying to gain a deeper understanding of how all this stuff is being considered. You know, one of the things I've taken away from all this is that gateways such as block trades or Open Ledger are MSBs in the US. So fortunately, block trades and Open Ledger are incorporated in other jurisdictions. But that's an issue that we have to consider. So when you offer a side chain, you're creating a new animal, something that regulations don't know what to do with yet, because now you don't have a single issuer. Now you have a computer algorithm which is running on a consensus platform with people located all over the world. It's not, I guess if you viewed the co-signers collectively, they could be viewed as a issuer and be regulated, but individually, they're just block producers. So it's a very interesting workaround to the regulatory challenges that are faced by centralized issuers.
How to regulate a dynamic set of issuers is what Fox said, which is a good, I think, way of boiling down what you're talking about here.
Right. Are you the issuer because you're able to sign, even if you're not required to sign? If
Hold on a second here. There we go. Continue, please.
it gets even more interesting when you start to consider all this stuff in the framework of freedom of speech, which is ultimately all any of this is. I would love to see someone take on the government regarding all this stuff under the freedom of speech. I am allowed to sign this. I'm just like I'm allowed to use encryption. It's very interesting when they make a regulation that effectively says you're not allowed to say something and broadcast it, because by saying something and broadcasting it, you are effecting money transmission. So once you get into the purely informational realm, all the laws regarding property and trust and everything else, they just don't make sense. So I'm be very curious to see how that would happen. Now, when it comes to something like a centralized person signing off on things, that's creating a debt between two parties. There's a contract there that's potentially enforceable or not enforceable by the government. And there's a potential claim for the public good that you need to regulate them to prevent them from running off with the money, or from protect you against insufficient capital or backing or getting hacked or anything. But as soon as you go completely decentralized, all the arguments for why regulation is theoretically required disappear.
Now, why would that be? Because this is a dynamic group of individuals, or because they can go to different jurisdictions, or what is the reasoning?
Now, the reasoning is, well, there's two things. There's what the regulators might do, and then there's, I guess, there's an article recently on Lou Rockwell that I thought was very, very fascinating. It says that the amount of freedom we have is not based on the desire to regulate and enslave us, but the ability to. There is a cost-benefit analysis that the government always has to make. Does it cost to enforce a regulation, and how much benefit do they get from doing so? Which establishes a price on tyranny, a price on enslaving us.
Yeah.
And anything we do that increases the price of enslaving us results in decreasing the demand to enslave us.
Wow, that's rich.
However, when you get to the people at the top of the food chain, like the Rockefellers and the Carnegies and the Rothschilds and all those power brokers, money in their cost doesn't mean anything to them. So I'm not sure the formula applies when you get to that level of control.
Well, there's different types of costs, not necessarily financial cost, but political costs. Getting people, having the public support, maintaining your legitimacy in the eyes of the people. And there's just so many people you can hire, right? There's only so much they can tax. There's only so much they can spend and inflate on these types of things. And going after someone who hasn't harmed people in a very public way, going after someone, going after someone to, all right, you shut down one person and someone else steps up and takes over. You don't actually end up shutting down the system. It's like going after people for copyright infringement. They can't. They do prosecute a few people, but it's a losing battle. It's kind of like all the other areas where they've been spending so much on enforcement, eventually they have to pull back. This is why people lose wars in Afghanistan, because the cost is too high compared to the benefit, even for these people that, from our perspective, have unlimited budgets. The reality is, collectively, we can impose costs that are as great as their ability to tax, or as their ability to, they're actually beyond their ability. So individually, it might seem like, we are powerless and they have all the power, but collectively we have far more market power than anyone else out there. So
it's a matter of mobilizing that power so that we can band together. That's what these communities, grassroots communities, hopefully will blossom up to be. But if you look at revolutions and other changes in society in the course of history, it's always a small minority that seems to affect change. So I'm not sure how important the whole collective approach is to any mass kind of change.
So, the mutual aid society is an example of increasing their costs. If they want to prosecute someone, now that person has an army of defense lawyers with lots of money behind them. That makes the cost of attacking one person equal to the cost of attacking the group. Whereas the one person might have been helpless, the group is not. And they don't have enough money to prosecute everyone individually. So the strength the government has is they're able to take a whole lot of power and focus it on one person. That one person is not able to resist, and so they go along. What we need is an alternative government structure that's able to take an equal amount of power and push back. Now, how does all this relate to sidechains? Sidechains is going to be the process by which all new blockchain applications interoperate. It's how blockchains will scale. And it's how this will happen without being able to shut down by regulators. BitShares, with delegated proof of stake, has the best foundation for sidechains compared to any other system out there. The elected witnesses are, refined trust. They've got a lot to lose, but they're inherently trusted. That trust can be used to bridge a whole lot of projects. You can bridge Ethereum and Bitcoin to BitShares. If you wanted to create a new blockchain, that blockchain can be bridged to the DEX through a sidechain without having to hard fork the central chain that's doing all the DEX-like features.
Bytemaster, I posted something to the forum a few days ago regarding sidechains, and it's I think a different use case model than what I think has generally been discussed so far. It may not be viable, but in my opinion, or in my view, I was thinking about sidechains and thinking that if there was like a mirror account, if you are a BTC owner and had a BTC an address, an account, and you wanted to transmit that BTC through the BitShares network to some other location, then you could dump that coin or basically escrow that coin into the BitShares ecosystem. But if you had an account on the BitShares ecosystem, then it's really up to you in terms of whether or not you have collateral on one side, and you could balance it yourself, and you'd be in full control of whether or not you spent it on the BitShares blockchain or you spent it on the original BTC blockchain. What do you think about that use case model, as opposed to some of the other types of ways of implementing the sidechain?
Having accounts on multiple chains, effectively, you transfer your Bitcoin in. It's held by the witnesses collectively. No one witness can spend it, and then the witnesses issue a receipt onto the BitShares network, which then trades. You can transfer that receipt between your BitShares accounts, and it's fully backed, and then you can convert it back. One person asks, will the process be slow? Well, if you have two blockchains that are both like BitShares, then the delay would be how long the last irreversible block is between the two blockchains. It gets even more interesting if you consider you can use the same witnesses on both chains potentially. But assuming they're completely different sets of witnesses, and that the BitShares witnesses are just accessing the state from the other chain, the irreversible block takes about 3 seconds times 17 blocks or so. It's about 1 minute. So you could transfer from BitShares to another chain in about a minute, which is actually faster than Bitcoin and Litecoin and Next and everyone else. So it doesn't have to be slow. But if you're trying to transfer from Bitcoin into your BitShares account, you're going to have to wait for the last irreversible Bitcoin block, which is at least 6 confirmations, if not 120 confirmations, depending upon how conservative you wanted to make it. And that's how long it would take for the Bitcoin to show up in your BitShares wallet. I think most people would recognize that the slowdown is not on the cross-chain, side-chain to and from conversion, but entirely based on the speed of the relative chains. If you're operating on a slow chain,
saying the 1.0 versions.
Right. So what I'd say is we can take the witnesses that we have now, add a single operation, which is to confirm a block ahead of your block production slot, and we can reduce the confirmation time down to potentially just 1 or 2 blocks, right? So 10 seconds to migrate from one BitShares like chain, from one graphene chain to another graphene chain, which is huge. With this functionality, it means that we can build applications such as Mutual Aid Society on their own blockchain with their own scalability considerations, and then they can trade on the DEX with one-to-one direct pairing. So you can port your application between the two. That way we don't actually have to hard fork BitShares to add Mutual Aid Society support to it. We can do that as a side chain to BitShares. And
nice.
It's because
it wouldn't be limited to only graphene type blockchains. There are others out there that have very short confirmation times, like Dash, for example. They've built up a layer around the Bitcoin slowness so that a lot of their state is stored within a decentralized storage mechanism. So their confirmation times are very, very fast as well. So a bridge, a side chain to Dash, for example, might be just as quick as a side chain to another graphene network.
Correct. It all depends upon the speed of the network you're going to or from. So it's going to be the slower of the two is the speed at which you can transact. But the main point I want to get at here is by developing this feature, we can have a single blockchain that focuses on one thing, being the best exchange and being the escrow agent, if you will, for funds from all the other blockchains out there. So all of the funds will be as secure as the witness voting, which means if you care about that, you're going to have to buy stake in BitShares in order to vote to make sure that those people are reliable and trustworthy. And then, so that's basically the idea behind sidechains. I think it's something that BitShares architecture can do better than the Ethereum proof of stake algorithm, better than the next proof of stake or the PureCoin.
One of the things I was thinking about when I posted that thing about the side chains is that there's models where you don't have to have a BitShares account if you're a BTC and you want to transfer things through the BitShares network to some other merchant that might have a bridge or whatever. But having an account, in other words, if you mirrored accounts between the Bitcoin and the other and BitShares, then not only does that help because we have more users over here, it increases our user base, so that it's a win on that level as well. Whereas if you did it without requiring that, then you're not going to get that benefit.
Yes, it helps dramatically if users' private keys are all in one wallet, and you can sign your Bitcoin transaction and manage your Bitcoins within, say, a BitShares wallet. And you add that same level of support for all of the different coins, and you have one wallet. You can have BTC on chain of the other. You can tell it to move from one to the other without having to go through any complicated memo forms or whatever. It can all be done in one place. Now, implementing side chains like this is a massive undertaking. I'd say it's as massive as graphene. So you're talking 3 to 6 months with lots of developers handling things. So getting this funded is going to take a while to do, but doing so will really change the game for blockchains in general. So now it's no longer a question of, do I want to build on the Ethereum network so that I can trade with all the other currencies on that network? I can build my own app with my own app token, and it can trade with everything on BitShares, and I don't have to ask permission to do so. You do, I guess, have to ask permission to be added as a side chain. But adding someone as a side chain can be done without hard forking BitShares, as long as all the witnesses upgrade. Once the witnesses upgrade, everyone else can start to benefit from it. So in a way, the witnesses merge the state from multiple chains. The challenge becomes that if Ethereum hard forks, it represents a hard fork for all the witnesses too, because they need to make sure that they all upgrade the Ethereum client to keep in sync with that network. And if they don't, then things will break down on the BitShares side.
That could be a really big scheduling nightmare if we had a whole lot of side chains together, that where you had to marry the schedules between these hard forks. But if you limited it and grow that slowly, then maybe we could figure out a way to manage those forks as necessary.
Yes, so side chains should not be added in the experimental stage, only when they're mature, and where hard forks happen on a scheduled basis. In fact, you'd probably want to see most blockchains all doing their hard forks at about the same time if this really gained network effect.
I was talking to somebody from our community who due to business arrangements and things that they do in the real world, they didn't want to be named. But they mentioned something about the Ethereum virtual machine plus side chains as being a very like a synergistic type of benefit. Do you agree with that? And if so, why so? And if not, why not?
The virtual machine allows two blockchains with the same virtual machine to integrate with whatever communication they want between the two of them. So integrating with Ethereum will be a lot easier than integrating with Bitcoin, because you have a lot more power over what the Ethereum accounts look like. Whereas Bitcoin, you've got a limited multi-sig structure, difficult to pass memos, things like that. It's just so that there's Ethereum's flexibility makes it easy to integrate it with whatever other system out there. What Ethereum's flexibility doesn't give you is the trusted set of signers that can reliably port funds between two blockchains.
Yeah.
So only with DPoS and its voting do you get a distilled trust that's decentralized, can be changed quickly, where there's peer review. It's not open to someone buying their way in. All right, so if there was $1 billion held in escrow by these multi-sig agents, and you could buy your way in with proof of work, all of a sudden the reward for the attack goes up dramatically because you can steal the entire pot with a single double spend. So you need much higher levels of trust. And I think that the security model by DPoS and its voting is a lot harder to manipulate, a lot harder to buy up without being obvious that you're buying it up.
Lucky Bit saying here is the only benefit of EVM is you have ease of use. Everyone will be used to EVM, but it's not secure like Taw Chain. Are you familiar with Taw Chain?
Vaguely, yes. I looked into that a while ago. All these chains start to blend together in my mind, but
yeah, sure.
I believe it took a declarative approach versus a procedural approach to their machine, which made it possible for a computer to verify the contracts that they are complete and valid and not endless loops and lots of other things, right? It's a lot easier to analyze statically the contracts. I agree, it's a fascinating approach that's potentially safer. It's a lot of work to do that kind of thing. I think other virtual machine structures, such as the one there's I forget what it was called right now, but there's another competitor to Ethereum that's assembly based, a lot more efficient. So there's lots we can do with virtual machines. How do we slice, dice, and prioritize all these things? In my mind, we have to get the current interface quirks worked out, and then we can dive into additional innovation. One of the things I'd like to see is a complete rework of the wallet structure. No one likes to hear that, especially after we've been working on the graphene wallet for the better part of a year. We are continually learning more, and the web technologies are improving. There's a new Flux or Redux architecture that makes it possible to do unit tests and basically turns the wallet internal state into a mini blockchain with deterministic transitions that can be tested. It's a much better architecture, and it will solve a lot of bugs. So I'd like to see that. I'd also like to see a move to server-side rendering, so you don't have to download a 2 megabyte file before you can even start to see the wallet.
Did you get any takers on the post you put out there about the server-side rendering?
Some people were working on it. I haven't seen anything complete yet. But
the other question I had regarding the Flux is, will there be performance trade-offs for the benefit of getting the unit testing that the Flux architecture you're talking about provides?
It should perform better because the code is much better structured. So the unit test is a separate aspect. It means we can test all the UI actions with deterministic state transitions. So these are the things that we've been researching and growing our understanding of and experimenting with behind the scenes. Eventually, they'll find their way into BitShares. So you can think of it as a version 2 of the user interface. So I just want to throw out those things. It will, with those types of improvements, when you load openledger.info, you should get an immediate page rendered with all your data, no delays, minimal bandwidth. It also means
Wow.
Things like search engines could do SEO processing of the actual wallet. So that could be interesting.
Bytemaster,
That
you
sounds
mentioned
very
that
interesting.
one of the bug fixes that you came up with recently that's in there is reducing the redundancy of communications. I forget exactly what you said, but it's been an issue of performance for a while that you've just recently solved. And the reason that was in there was just to make sure that there was rebroadcasting, just to make sure that the wallet was informed of all the changes. Now, will this kind of redux flux blockchain kind of architecture eliminate that entirely?
It should dramatically improve how data is communicated between the client and server. So these are longer term changes that will take a while to do. They'd probably be done in parallel. You probably have the old and new systems operating side by side, so that we can get the bugs worked out of the new system before we make it the default one. But what I'm trying to say here is that there's a lot of work to be done, and figure out which to do first. It really depends on funding. If the market cap keeps going up and people like what we are trying to do and like the approach that we have, then it'll be easy to fund this. We can hire more people. So our budget doubled this week. That's great. Let's make the best of it.
Certainly. I did want to ask you one question. I had a conversation with Vor regarding the EVM, and along the same lines, I was talking about the EVM with the gentleman I was talking with, regarding the EVM and side chains. And Vor basically told me that he was interested in potentially working on an Ethereum virtual machine being built or being ported over to BitShares. Do you see this as like a benefit that's something that we should look at or no? And some of the people in Telegram made some valid considerations toward the question of, is that virtual machine the best one? Would there be a better one?
All right, when it comes to virtual machines, it's possible to support multiple ones simultaneously. I look at it as Apple supporting Windows binaries. It would make it easier for users of existing apps to migrate. So it's a user migration strategy to support an inferior virtual machine if there are superior ones. That said, the biggest challenge with all virtual machines is not the machine itself, but the developer tools and libraries around it. Ethereum, with its billion-dollar market cap and correspondingly large development fund, will continue to move ahead with so many tools. They're going to become the Microsoft of virtual machines on blockchains. Every application, is going to be coded to it. It's going to be extremely expensive to redevelop those applications on different architectures. So, in my opinion, supporting the Ethereum virtual machine and making it easy to migrate smart contracts with minimal changes to those smart contracts, is the best way to piggyback on the network effect of people creating small experimental chains.
Interesting. So you're saying that the actual libraries that developers would use with the EVM would be one of the main points for going with EVM, and in addition, that they're spending a lot of time in the blockchain space and pretty much are ahead of the game in that.
It would take a monumental effort, tens of millions of dollars, to produce a development environment that's able to compete with Ethereum. Even though, in my opinion, there's possible to do things much better than they are. It sometimes doesn't matter if you're better if you've got the network effect of developers and libraries, because the cost of re-implementing everything is so high that you wouldn't try to do so. There's going to be a market for it, and I think supporting as many different virtual machines as we can, building our own and trying to grow it will be great. At the end of the day, performance is going to be the bottleneck of the EVM. They're working on addressing it, but until there is another virtual machine that is clearly much faster than Ethereum, people don't have a reason to go anywhere else or look at anything else.
This is a very interesting perspective that LuckyBet's bringing up here, and I did not realize it until he said it. I mean, I remember it now, but he says it's looking like Ethereum is Windows 95. And he's saying essentially, if you were a gamer in Windows 95 era, you could not game in Linux. You had to game in Microsoft environment. So because even though Microsoft's environment wasn't as good for gaming and as effective as actually using the hardware, Linux didn't have any way of people playing the games because they didn't have the development libraries and all that stuff for it at the time. Is that correct?
Yes, when it comes to developing software, the libraries, we all stand on the shoulders of giant libraries, right? BitShares is built on top of Boost. Our wallet's based on top of React.js and hundreds of JavaScript libraries. If we had to write our own libraries, standard libraries for everything, it would increase the cost of producing BitShares orders of magnitude. And the same thing's going to apply to blockchain or any language. The reason people continue to use C++ and C is largely due to the huge number of libraries that those things have. The reason people use Java is the huge number of libraries. The reason why I haven't adopted some of the newer languages is because the libraries aren't there for all the things you might want to do. So,
such as Rust, for example?
Yes. When you go to do something and you can't find a library or you can't find coding examples, it makes it a lot harder to get it done. So that's why I believe the Ethereum virtual machine is here to stay. It's going to be as hard to displace as displacing Bitcoin. But this is where sidechains, I think, is the answer. With sidechains, it can be possible to give application developers the C++ language and all of its performance and libraries and utilities with the benefit of being interoperable with the other smart contracts, at least as far as token exchange goes.
Noisy asks a really good question here. He said, how do we cut this elephant into slices? How do we start working on them? And what can we do now or tomorrow? And from what you're saying before, it sounds like Ethereum would be the easiest side chain to implement because of the EVM and all the stuff they've built into to allow that flexibility. Would that be a good starting point, or do you think that there's another place that we should start? What are your thoughts?
Like I said earlier, I was answering that question already. So you asked the question after I thought I answered it. We should start making sure. Start by making sure the current infrastructure is usable for the time being. And you can go for a relatively long period of time without updates while we work on the next generation of wallet interface. So long as our conversion rates are low because of stupid little bugs like timeouts expiring and things that we can address relatively cheaply, you'll have compounding effects while we wait for the upgrade. So we need to get what we have now functioning and reliable enough that people can just use it and it can be steady and stable. And then you start a longer development cycle to refactor, take things to the next level. If you have a team, side chains can be implemented without any changes to BitShares. So there's no reason why this cannot be done in parallel. So please consider that. In the short term, experimenting with liquidity rewards is a hard forking change that's probably easier to do than bond markets. But I tend to want to focus on BitShares being exchange features and go in the sidechain approach. So it might be wise if we're going the sidechain approach to let Ethereum be Ethereum and we're just sidechain to it. We'll be the exchange. Ethereum can't do what we can do. They're so far away from being able to handle the exchange stuff that we do that we should focus on making our exchange the best, bridging the sidechain, rather than trying to be everything in one blockchain.
Yeah. And from what you're saying, the graphene toolkit, then we're pretty much in a place that once people see what graphene can do, we're probably going to see a lot more graphene-based side chains or blockchains pop up that we can easily turn into side chains of ours.
Yes, I can confirm that there are many graphene-based chains going on behind the scenes that haven't been announced yet.
Really?
That's quite a bombshell. With regard to what you were saying about the side chains, is the Ethereum EVM not something that you would consider necessary for the EVM sidechain work if that was to be done?
If there was to be a graphene-based EVM, I would think it'd be better to make it its own graphene-based chain and then have a side chain that bridge Ethereum, the graphene Ethereum, and BitShares all together via the sidechain infrastructure.
So you do think that it would be beneficial to implement the EVM of the Ethereum EVM in combination with the sidechain approach?
Yes, because it's a stepping stone. If we build a system like that can outperform Ethereum at its own applications, it'd be like someone creating a Windows emulator that runs Windows apps twice as fast. What do you think people are going to do?
Good point.
Did you want to comment on the Forbes article at all? And how do you like the term decentralized conglomerate?
I like the term. I haven't read the article. So it looked like an interesting article, but I obviously have a lot to do.
Fair enough.
Speaking of that type of question, what about Azure? Do you have any comments about Azure?
Yep, thank you.
To be honest, people complain about BitShares being hard to understand. I went to the Azure website trying to understand what in the world it was, and it made no sense to me. And I don't think, it seems to be a very critical thing, and from what I can tell, it seems to be nothing more than like a advanced form of Docker or virtual machines that get set up and running. So I wasn't able to understand what's so big about it, but anything that makes it easier for people to deploy wallets and integrate them with their application is great. So I think the best way to fund some of these things is to identify an area in the market, find people that want to raise money, and go tackle that, right? So creating a side chain is almost like a fee-backed asset. The side chain runs with its own asset. It trades into and out of the decentralized exchange, and anything that happens on that side chain accrues value to the asset backing it. So the difference is you don't have to ask permission of anyone to create a sidechain fee-backed asset, and that's huge. So if BitShares wants to corner the market and have the BitShares witnesses be the ones that bridge everyone into and out of BitShares, I think it's of critical importance for BitShares to fund development of sidechain infrastructure.
So what action steps should be taken and by whom to do this?
The first step is to identify a worker proposal. Talk to people like Block Trades. I talked to them a little bit about it. They've got a lot on their plate. Try to come up with a protocol definition. Let's try to spec it out, and then we can try to fund it with a worker. I don't know that the Blockstream guys can help. One thing I've noticed in the cryptocurrency world, and maybe it's just me that's the problem, but everyone has their own little playground, and people have a hard time thinking outside of their playground.
Actually, at one point in time, I was just recently looking into this, and Blockstream seems to have on one of their websites that they were talking about potential grant funding to build sidechains onto Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's the problem.
I can look for it.
There are sidechains on the Bitcoin. We're talking about making Bitcoin a sidechain to BitShares.
Also, so essentially it is different. It's not it's not something where we can connect up as a side chain to Bitcoin. And then, because how I always understood side chains was it pretty much the network that had the best services would become the maiden chain, and all the other ones would essentially function as side chains to that other one, even if one of them started out as the quote unquote leader.
In order to, the primary difference between Bitcoin and BitShares is how authority is determined. Bitcoin determines authority by hashes. BitShares determines authority by signatures. The
Gotcha.
BitShares authority model can be used as multi-sig within Bitcoin, and so that works. But the Bitcoin authority model means nothing to BitShares users.
Gotcha.
And do we want the miners to be the ones that can dictate where the funds are trusted? Or do we want elected witnesses to be the ones guarding the funds?
Yes.
So if you try to put together a design talking about the two, theirs is going to have hash power as the authority, and we're going to have witness voting as the authority with multi-sig. And I think our approach is much more secure than their approach, much more dynamic, and ultimately probably more robust.
And then you can have a hybrid approach like Dash.
Right. So figuring out how to do the side chains is a matter of defining consensus among multiple blockchains. At the highest level, the way I would do it is I'd publish the block hash of all the different blockchains into a new blockchain. I have the witnesses apply blocks in the order that they see there, and as a result, the witnesses will all have the exact same consistent state across all blockchains at the same time. And then they can make business decisions and take actions based upon that globally ordered sequence of events.
Got you. And
I guess basically
you answered my question then. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Basically, publish the block hash of all the different chains into the BitShares blockchain through custom operations, and then write some code that interprets those custom operations, fetches those blocks, applies those blocks to the our own internal nodes for those chains. That our nodes won't run updating when the rest of the world updates. It'll take its queue to update from the blocks in our ledger, and there he goes. So
wouldn't it have a dramatic impact on the infrastructure required for us to operate the DPoS chain to use all these other, to basically represent the state of any Bitcoin in particular, because it's so big, but even as you add multiple side chains or bridges, that it's going to really impact the resources required to run it on our side of the fence?
Yes, every witness will be required to run the nodes from all chains that are side chains. You wouldn't necessarily have to run it on one machine, but you would have to have access. Now, if there is a trusted node, all the witnesses can be light clients to the other chains, and that's all that's really required.
Now, there was one, I don't, and I'll just try to leave it at this, but I was talking to AJ last night, and he was talking about the Daily Decrypt interviewed somebody who was talking about side chains and how they were actually pretty insecure in terms of people would be able to potentially even create double spends to get multiple tokens in another system. Does that make any sense to you? Are you familiar with this attack?
I've always thought the sidechain approach was like the one that Blockstream is advocating was weak and insecure. A little bit of history. Way back before ProtoShares even existed, I was developing a design for sidechains as a way of trying to scale the transaction throughput of BitShares. And I came up with an approach that's very similar to one they had, and then I realized that hash power, if you manage to take over the hash power on the sidechain, you could steal all the funds of the sidechain. And when I came to that conclusion, I abandoned the idea.
Gotcha.
So, Stan can, was one of the ones pushing me at the time, figure out a way to do all these side chains on one chain, or have one currency used across multiple blockchains so we can scale. And so I came up with something very similar to what's now known as a Bitcoin sidechain. But it's every which way I cut it, it was insecure. People claim, well, merge mining can make it more secure, but then you still require all the miners to merge mine all the side chains, which is effectively what we're asking the witnesses to do, is merge mine all the chains, which means all the witnesses have all the chains.
Yeah.
Bytemaster, is there any evidence online for that effort that you just described, whether it be in GitHub or discussions on forums?
Unfortunately, no. There's only one other person who is unlikely to collude with me. It's Charles Hoskinson. He was a big proponent in pushing me to try to come up with that. So, if you can get him to admit to the fact that we were trying to design side chains back then, that would probably be the closest form of Stan and I colluding to make stuff up. But
okay,
I can
thank
say
you.
for sure that if he were to say it, you could be pretty much certain that it's true, because but anyway, we're sitting at about an hour and 25 minutes. I don't want to push you guys too far, but does anybody have anything that they feel has not been covered that we need to maybe spend a couple minutes on?
yeah, real quick, T-Bone, he's asked about the hosted web wallet. That is going to be released as a test today, and we have a video showing it. I believe that was covered earlier in the Mumble session.
And I think a good takeaway, at least for me here, is that sidechains and BitShares are completely different than those in Bitcoin. So this is something that's important for me to know. So thanks for explaining this.
I also just wanted to mention it would be nice if people updated their votes with some of the transfers and stuff going on. Votes have shifted. I see one of Xerox workers is in. That's, I think, documentation and support, but his Python library is currently out, and I think that includes trading bot stuff, which would be good to have. And my worker is kind of sitting just above the threshold. So if you could all take some time to update your votes, that would be much appreciated.
Yeah, and while I've got this topic open, I want to let you guys know I have here, I'm going to be starting to put up advertisements in our Hangouts. and also I have them here in the Mumble server. And you guys all receive 20 copper tickets per hangout for participating in this, right? So if anybody like wants to come together and help pay a couple silver tickets, things like what Roadscape is talking about right now, we could have links to them in the Mumble, and I put the hangout an ad or two in there to tell people to make sure to do things like this. So the cool thing about it is, you guys are here, you're part of this community, and because of that, you're going to be given tokens that you can use to advertise what you think is important. And I'll be helping to make sure that that happens. So I just want to let you guys all know that that's important to me to let you know. And Roadscape, is there a link that you have to vote on all this stuff for anybody who's here if they want to just click on it and vote?
I do not have it handy. Let me pull it up just a sec.
Yeah, it would be awesome, man. Thank you very much, Bytemaster. And thank you everybody for attending.